David Falk taught me the evolution of business, how to utilize my likeness, my personality, my basketball talent, and channel that into the business aspect of Michael Jordan as a person.
Everyone who's been represented by David turns out winning. He really takes good care of his people, and we've become great friends, and my life has gotten a lot better as a result of my association with David.
I think the only person I've ever met who's more competitive than David Falk is Michael Jordan. I think what's made him successful is his tenacity. He never stops.
The more I was around him, even though I couldn't get in a word because he talked so damn much, I knew that I liked this guy. I really liked him, and I thought he really worked hard at what he did, and that was very important to me.
If David Falk had been my agent, I'd probably be the happiest man in the world today, because he knew how to strike a deal with other owners.
David Falk's reputation, I think his reputation towards the players, from the players was great. The management side, they thought it was cutthroat. He's hard-nosed, hard negotiator. So he was always in the corner for the players.
I would say that the words I would use to characterize my relationship with David while I was commissioner was contentious friends, or we were friendly and contentious at the same time.
David Falk has amassed an unparalleled list of clients, representing the best and changing the American sports landscape in a career that has spanned 5 decades. He grew up in this house on Long Island in the 1950s and 60s. It would not be a dead end for David Falk.
My mother was a highly educated woman. She had 2 master's degrees. She was an interpreter. During World War II, she worked at the Department of Latin American Affairs for Nelson Rockefeller, later became the governor of New York, and she eventually became a high school teacher. And she was really my mentor, my life mentor. Her mantra that she imbued with me from the time I was very young was always shoot for the stars and never settle for second best. And that's something that has stayed in my DNA my entire life.
It was a big, very demanding household. You had chores to do. School was paramount. You must do well in school. A B wasn't accepted.
So when I was growing up, at the end of 5th and 6th grade, there was like sort of a rite of passage. It was called an autograph book. One guy in my class was named Gregory Mallow. It wasn't particularly a good friend, but you spend every day with the same people. And he wrote in my book, "You should be a lawyer because you're a good arguer." That observation, for some reason I really can't explain, always stuck in my mind. So probably from the 5th grade on, I always had this vision that I wasn't going to be an astronaut, I wasn't going to be a baseball player or a fireman, that I was going to be a lawyer. And it stuck with me through college.
I don't think he knew what kind of application of the law he wanted, but he always wanted to be a lawyer, and that dad used to call him counselor. That was his nickname, call him the counselor. So I knew he was going to be successful because whatever he did, he succeeded at.
David Falk graduated from General Douglas MacArthur High School in Levittown, New York in 1968. He was a mathlete and an editor of the yearbook. That fall, David arrived at Syracuse University.
And the best thing that happened to me is on opening day, I got to meet the 2-star basketball players who live right down the hall from me, room number 10, Greg the Kid Coles and Paul Petrowski. We became lifelong friends. I didn't plan to be a sports lawyer, but it was sort of a dream. It wasn't a plan because I didn't know that I could execute a plan like that. I definitely wanted to be a lawyer. And when I met these guys, God, the wheels started ticking. I said, gosh, how cool would it be if 4 years down the road, if they get to where they need to go and I get to where I need to go, maybe we could be business partners.
There was a big party one night, and I looked across the room, and there was this fellow sitting on an end table next to the couch. Not sitting on the couch, but sitting on the end table. And I thought, I wonder why he's not sitting on the couch. He's kind of good looking. And I watched him go to the punch bowl. So I followed him. And I asked him to serve me some punch. I was very attracted to, besides the fact he was good looking, was he was very ambitious. And a lot of guys at that age, some were, some weren't. He was articulate, bright, but his ambition, he really knew what he wanted to do. And it wasn't like, what was he going to do when he grew up? He was already grown up. And I really respected that. I liked that. I found that as attractive as his looks.
We're sitting in the library studying together, and this is the old library at SU, and the desk was very, very narrow, so the person across from you, in this case David, was fairly close to me, and I see him moving his fingers back and forth, speed reading, and he tells me he had learned to speed read with Evelyn Wood's foundation. And when I saw him read that fast, I said, this guy's smart. He's going to learn a lot. But beyond his natural raw intelligence, I saw a guy and got to know a guy who had tremendous drive and tremendous determination to really do whatever he really put his mind to.
David Falk got his bachelor's degree in economics from Syracuse in 1972, and he headed for George Washington University Law School in Washington, D.C. His new wife, Rhonda, joined him there to finish her degree.
We both were working hard, trying to get on track to make a living. I worked for George Washington University as an admissions counselor, and I sought that job because it helped pay David's tuition to law school, which we needed at the time.
I was still in school. We were struggling financially because we didn't have very much money. And I was working when I was in law school for a law firm named Dell, Craighill, Fetris, and Benton that later became the firm ProServe. And I started working there at the end of my second year in the summer.
He pursued that job doggedly. He must have called Donald Dell every day, I don't know how many times a day, because that's what he wanted to do. And to get his foot in the door in that industry, even if it meant volunteering time, was what you had to do in those days. And he did it.
In 1976, Maryland point guard John Lucas was the #1 pick in the NBA draft. He would become David Falk's first major client at ProServe. Falk was just 1 year out of law school.
I did the most mundane tasks you could imagine back in 1976 for John Lucas, who was basically my first client. If he would buy a tire for his car, I would call up 5 tire companies in Houston and try to save him $15. Today, you try to see if you can save a guy $15,000 on buying his Bentley. But back then, I was very, very hands-on.
David has always been there with me, and his loyalty is never wavering, even with all of the things that I went through my drug addiction, to my coaching. As a player, he's always been there, and I consider him a lifetime friend of mine. And he's just, first of all, a consummate businessman, a consummate father, and he's just a great role model for me and for others.
We went through all the highs and the lows of this business you could possibly experience, and he became the first player that was thrown out of the league for drugs. I probably learned everything you could possibly learn in this business by the time I was about 27 from John. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I think in the industry, David has been the point guard, and I think that some of the guys have either loved him or hated him because he's had the ball, and he's always been a step of everybody else, ahead of the salary cap, what was coming, always pushing the envelope. And I think for a long time, he set the market price dollars for players.
In 1982, we represented a very special player named James Worthy from North Carolina. And James North Carolina won the national championship his junior year. Michael Jordan hit the winning shot in New Orleans against Georgetown. And the Lakers had made a trade. I believe they had traded a very average journeyman named Don Ford from the University of Santa Barbara to Cleveland for the #1 pick of the draft, and Cleveland finished with the worst record, so the Lakers got the pick and they selected James Worthy. It was the only time in the history of the league that the team that had just won the championship had the chance to sign the #1 player of the draft. We got a very, very strong contract for James that year. Probably 2 to 3 times what Magic had gotten 3 years before as the #1 pick. From a very, very sophisticated owner, Jerry Buss, who we had known from the tennis world. It was a very friendly negotiation, very, very intellectual negotiation. 3 years later, we came to represent Patrick Ewing, who was the #1 pick in the draft, who was really my first megastar that I signed on my own from John Thompson. And John allowed me on my own, without Donald Dell, without my boss, to be Patrick's primary agent, which was really a milestone in my career. One of the many great things that John has done for me over my career. And of all the deals I'd ever done, I realized this was my breakthrough opportunity.
Sometimes I thought David was too nice when he was young. As he got older, he became sharp. But I used to always tell him that the job that he has in trying to negotiate for his clients, he wasn't gonna make a lot of friends, and I think he caught on to that too fast, quick. He's very smart.
John Thompson, as I wrote in my book, very unabashedly, and I'm not an unabashed person, John Thompson's probably, other than my mother, has probably been the biggest influence on my life. He hired me to be his lawyer and his advisor, and I probably learned way more from him than I've shared with him, over the 35 years we've been together. And he has taught me things that I think that no one else would even dare to discuss. He's been an amazing friend, a mentor, confidant, and a person that, I think has really changed my life.
I know very few white men that have ever said a black man taught them anything. There may be a lot of them, but I sure don't know them. And especially when you're looked upon as being the best in your business. That's the biggest compliment to me, the fact that he was comfortable enough and honest enough to say I contributed to his knowledge, and he is the best.
To have David Falk in my corner, with the new lottery system, I think was great. The salary structure when I came in definitely changed, and I think the ingenuity that David possessed was one of the main reasons why salaries are the way that they are right now, because I was one of the first to receive a significant contract. I would describe David's competitive spirit as being sort of like, you're going into the championship game. This is the Game 7 championship game. He has his game face on when he's going into a negotiation. He's ready. He's done all his practicing against the second team. The shot clock is winding down, and he's focusing, is intense on making that shot, making that free throw, or getting that stop to help his client.
David Falk's life changed forever when he started representing megastars, and during the same period became a father.
Becoming a parent, I think it made him very aware of how his hard work and working long hours prevented him from being with his family as much as he may have liked to be. So he didn't change. That warm, loving person was always there. But work was the precedent, essentially, at the time, because he was trying to make it work.
Come on, Joss. Lock to Daddy. Bring her a little closer, Daddy. Bring her a little closer.
I will say, however, though, when he was with us, he was a fabulous dad. Still is. Got into the girls' sports, going to the tennis matches, softball games, very much little soccer games when they were very small, and very much part of it. I mean, he was into sport, even though he didn't have the sons. He was very much into their sports and very supportive, which he still is.
Players used to stay in our guest rooms, and they was around. We had players come over for dinner. We'd go out for Chinese food. We had holidays with them. I mean, they were always around. They were sort of like these gigantic uncles for me as a kid. It's gotten a little strange now that I'm actually older than the guys who are entering the league. So they're like my cousins or little brothers now, but they were always like uncles.
The most important thing I learned from my father, is something he instilled in me from the earliest age I could talk. My grandmother, his mother, passed away right before I was born, Pearl Falk, and I was born right after she passed. So it was sort of a special moment for him, sad obviously, but then I came into the world. And when I was old enough to talk, he taught me to say over and over again every night before bed, always shoot for the stars, never settle for second best.
The business relationship that would come to define David Falk began in 1984 when he became Michael Jordan's agent.
He saw something that no one's ever been able to do, and he basically, with a blank sheet of paper, created his own perception of what he felt like he can, develop in terms of an athlete who had great personality, who come from a great family background, who had great potential from a basketball sense, and a bunch of companies looking for that type of marriage. And he carved out that whole persona, that whole Michael Jordan perception with corporations that everybody to this day has been trying to emulate.
I told the companies, sort of like the famous John Kennedy line, ask not what America could do for you, but what you could do for America. I said, I know what Michael could do for your company. I want to know what you prepared to do if we sign with you for Michael. And Nike got it. I said, if you are interested in signing Michael Jordan, you've got to give him his own line. You got to treat him like a tennis player. I want his own line of shoes and clothing.
The whole premise of having your own shoe, no one knew where that would go, and if David knew that, then he understood the crystal ball. I think he had a vision without a doubt in terms of the first athlete being able to have their own signature shoe coming out of college. I think that was a great vision, but in terms of where that would lead us, there's no way, I could sit here today and say that 30 years ago we would be a billion-dollar brand.
It took David Falk's powers of persuasion to make the connection between Jordan and Nike.
Michael had no interest in going with Nike. He wanted to go with Adidas. That was his strong preference. And he didn't even want to get on the plane to see Nike. And I said, well, Michael, we're going to visit all the companies. It's like getting recruited by colleges, and you have to see the people and see the facilities and whatever. He said, David, honestly, I played a long season, just finished the Olympics with Coach Knight, it was grueling. I don't want to go. And I didn't know him very well. I only met him twice. We had no relationship. We barely knew each other. And I'm making my very first recommendation of my career, and he's basically turning me down. So I called his parents, and I said, look, if we're going to work together, you have to trust me. This is really the company that's going to do the most for Michael. They're the most innovative. They need him the most. They're not the big kid on the block. This isn't like North Carolina. And they said, okay, don't worry, David. We'll take care of it. So he got on the plane, and we flew out to Oregon through Chicago.
Nike's marketing chief, Rob Strasser, committed to giving Michael his own line of shoes and clothing in 1984, before he had even played an NBA game.
And he said, we're willing to commit to a line. What do you want to call it? I said, what do I want to call it? I want to call it Michael Jordan. Like, what else are you going to call it if it's a signature line? It's his signature shoe. And he said, David, you don't understand. The last 2 or 3 years in America, we've been inundated with designer products. No one is going to feel as any credibility in a 21-year-old basketball player, rookie, designing shoes. No one's going to think that Michael's sitting in his apartment coming up with ideas to design shoes. He has no expertise in design. So we can't call it Michael Jordan. So I said, okay, what do you want to call it? He said, that's your challenge. He said, we will make a line, but you've got to come up with a name for the line, but it can't be Michael Jordan. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that Nike had just come out with a new running shoe that had this allegedly revolutionary technology called air soles that cushion your foot. And I'm thinking to myself, air, Michael is a great dunker. He flies through the air. So I said, okay, literally, maybe it took me a minute. I got it. I said, we're going to call it Air Jordan. Air for the air soles, Jordan for Michael. So people know it's Jordan, but it doesn't say Michael Jordan.
That actually came from David and his creation, and ever since then he's been trying to create and equal the same type of exposure, but he hadn't been so lucky. But that was his creation, and somehow it just obviously with the way that I play the game, within the air, and obviously with the the way that people tend to connect with me once that did happen, it began to stick. And here, 30 years later, it's very prominent.
I would say that David Falk has been an agent of change by virtue of his work with Patrick Ewing and Michael Jordan, and his belief that individual players could become brands, as well as the league might become a brand and the team would become a brand. And so he worked arduously after the contract was executed for the benefit of his clients. And I think that was not always the case in the NBA before David.
It really was transcendent that Michael was being marketed as, in a team sport, as an individual that had really not been done very much in particularly in basketball.
What made Michael Jordan and David Falk such a successful team was that they complemented each other. And Michael obviously was a brilliant basketball player, great personality, had the big smile, but he was a naive kid coming out of North Carolina. And David realized what an asset he had, and it was David who groomed Michael, who taught Michael the business world, taught Michael how to present himself, and also came up with a tremendous number of ideas, including the now famous Air Jordans. So the fact that Michael was a great player wasn't enough. It took somebody like David Falk to come along and to maximize the potential of Michael Jordan.
David Falk was smart enough to be able to go out and sell his clients, and the ones that had extraordinary personalities, played the game at an extraordinary level. He was able to go out and change basketball in a way that maybe you can't describe. Michael Jordan is as big today, the Jordan brand is big today as Nike basketball. And he is still at the top of the heap because they knew how to market him, Nike did, but Michael's play, the ads, the everything he did seemed to fit into David's concept of how he could market the greatest player we've ever seen, Michael Jordan.
Michael broke down every boundary, every border, every barrier of race, ethnicity, age, and he made it cool for basketball players to be product endorsers on Wall Street. And he forever changed the way a player like LeBron James coming in 2003 or Kobe Bryant coming in 1996, what they expect. Every player today expects if I come out and I'm the guy, I'm gonna get my own shoes, I'm gonna get my own Gatorade, I'm gonna have McDonald's. It's like the lineup.
I think David's impact really comes down to the fact that he changed really the dynamic of the sports agent. And what I mean by that is he became more of a sports marketing plus a sports agent. He looked at players as, yes, I will get them a contract. Yes, I'll get them the most money I possibly can get them. But he also thought of each player as a brand.
David changed the way the market value of an athlete, a basketball player, is perceived, mainly by the way I think that he negotiated. I think his negotiating style, he was so confident and he was so in command of a negotiation that, to me, he was always the aggressor and always put you at a disadvantage on the other side.
I think what happens in professional sports, particularly in sports like team sports like baseball or football or basketball, is that most players' contributions and value are measured relative to everyone else. And so there's a system they call slotting. And what that means is in the old days, prior to the wage scale, if a player were drafted number 5, the team would look to see what the player make at number 4 and expect that the player at number 5 make a little bit less and a little bit more than the player at number 6. I decided early on that I wasn't going to submit to the slotting system, that I was going to try to determine on my own what I thought the value of my client was.
David Falk started his own agency, F.A.M.E, in 1992 after 17 years at ProServe. All of his clients came with him.
There aren't enough words for me to express to Michael how appreciative I am to him and to Patrick Ewing and John Thompson and JUWAN Howard, Elton Brand. Those guys stood with me, especially the earlier ones when I was young and I wasn't as established as I am perhaps today.
Over a period of time of success and collaboration and talking and education from David, we grew this bond, that earned my respect and my trust. His advice and his friendship has been very valuable to me.
He's a very, very smart guy. He knows what this business is all about. He knows what the market is. He knows what his player deserves. And I think what he does probably more than anything else is he will go and he will analyze all of the places where a player that he is representing can go, and he'll pick out the best situation for that player.
My job, as I saw it, was anticipating where was the market going. What was my player worth today? What would it be worth 4 or 5 years down the road? How long should I sign him for? What kind of structure should I be asking for? And I started developing my own market. And I came to call it when I went on my own, the F.A.M.E mini market.
Wants a screen, gets it from Howard. Oh, nice pass. Oh,
That's how in 1996, David Falk made JUWAN Howard, a very good player, but not a perennial all-star, the first athlete to sign a $100 million contract in the history of American team sports.
Well, I thought David was crazy. And, I was just like numb and in awe because that was something I never imagined at all whatsoever. I knew before Glenn Big Dog Robinson agent had tried to negotiate a $100 million deal for him, and they were unsuccessful. So I had heard those numbers being thrown out, but not for me. So, I didn't think, David knew what he was talking about, so it shocked me.
A year earlier, in 1995, Falk had negotiated a $100 million contract for Alonzo Mourning with Charlotte, but then told him to turn it down. He knew Mourning could get more money as a free agent just a year later.
The kinds of decisions that I've had to make with my clients over time require so much trust. If you tell a player like Alonzo Mourning in the mid-90s to turn down the first ever $100 million contract in professional sports when he grew up as a foster child in Virginia, if he doesn't really trust you, it's hopeless that he's going to listen to you.
In '96, when there was unrestricted free agent, I was calling all the shots. And that was the Wild West. The money was flying. I think at that time, the highest paid player in the NBA was Kevin Garnett, making $10 million. And both Alonzo Mourning and JUWAN Howard, the night of July the 1st in 1996, in 1 minute signed contracts worth $210 million. So.
For a quarter of a century, from his base in Washington, D.C., David Falk represented more NBA #1 picks and first-round draft choices than any other agent. There, in the nation's capital, he connected with others who were at the top of their game.
David Falk always looking for clients. That guy's talking to him. He'll be a free agent after next year. Fourth quarter, Nets up 5. Keith Van Horn, a Falk client, gets Michael Smith in the air and then abuses a baseline. Nets up 7. Falk says, would you like to see something in a wizard? I've got Ron Strickland. He's a client of mine. To another Falk client, JUWAN Howard. Wizards up 2. Those two keep nattering on. Wizards up 3 now. Falk client Jahidi White will take the pass and get it to go in the foul. Falk says, I also got Stephon Marbury somewhere.
David Falk's F.A.M.E agency made its mark in the NBA, but they also had NFL clients.
James Lofton was one of his clients. Prior to me getting there, he had Boomer Esiason. I think I came on board at that point in time. When guys found out who David was, and especially, you know, Bud Grant and Mike Lynn, who were in charge at the time with the Minnesota Vikings. You know, they literally expected that David was going to come in and ask for the moon, you know, and they kept saying, this is not basketball money, this is not basketball money. But, you know, he understood that. He understood the economics of the NFL, and he was able to, you know, work within that. But the great thing about that whole process, you know, he was able to make deals when teams didn't want to make deals.
The world was changing. You know, sports was, you know, like entertainment was becoming global, and the opportunity to have more resources and have greater reach in an ever-changing world was important. And David was out in front and seeing that potential and those possibilities.
The ultimate melding of sports and entertainment was Space Jam, which in 1996 took the marketing of athletes into a new stratosphere. David Falk was the executive producer.
Bugs Bunny?
And you were expecting maybe the Easter Bunny?
You're a cartoon, you're not real.
Not real, eh? If I weren't real, could I do this?
Space Jam was an amazing experience for everyone. Amazing in different ways. So Michael had been offered many, many roles in movies as his popularity grew. And we turned them all down. And Michael said to me, like, why do you want to turn them down? And I said to him, you know, you're not an actor, you're a basketball player. There's probably only one role you could play successfully. And he said, like, you mean James Bond? I said, no, Michael Jordan.
I wasn't really keen about it because I think in essence, I never considered myself an actor, you know, and they simplified things by saying, all you got to do is play yourself, you know, and I think that was one of the deciding factors of me doing the movie. That made things a little bit easier, and that's the only time I really started to accept the opportunity of, you know, acting. I have yet to do another one, but initially it's been, it was a great opportunity for me. I think it helped me resonate with a bunch of generations.
Back in the day, to think of you, I just remember looking at Michael Jordan on screen thinking, what can't this guy do? You know, he just can do everything. He's a jockey commercials in his underwear, you know, with Spike Lee and Nike commercials, Space Jam. To me, it was just amazing thinking the number of ways that you can market one particular person. David and Michael kind of set the tone for a lot of us to follow the roadmap.
Space Jam fired the imagination of writers for the HBO series Arliss, about a fictional sports agent in the 1990s, played by Robert Wohl.
David Falk shoot? I thought this was for the cover.
Well, they asked me to photograph you full frame, vertical format. That's a solo cover shot.
Good.
But that's also how they told me to shoot Mike Armstrong and David Falk.
Ah.
So I guess you three guys are slugging it out for the cover. Hey, is Falk a nice guy? I've got him tomorrow at 10. Is anything wrong?
No. David Falk is a great guy, and he happens to be one of my closest and dearest friends. And personally, I think he's getting a real bum rap on this Michael Jordan thing.
What Michael Jordan thing?
There is no Michael Jordan thing.
Do you deny that you cheated your client, Michael Jordan, on his back-end profits on Space Jam?
Categorically and officially. Now listen, I don't want to confuse you with the facts or anything, but you know, I waived my executive producer fee on Space Jam.
Big smile, Mr. Falk.
Now, about that cologne.
Who is feeding you all this nonsense?
David Falk sold his F.A.M.E agency to entertainment conglomerate SFX in 1998 for $100 million plus stock, and he became chairman of SFX Sports Group.
1995, having really done well with the rookies and outperformed the market consistently, we were sort of like the Warren Buffett of agents in basketball. The union put a wage scale in that basically homogenized the talent of the agents in negotiations. That's one of the reasons we sold the business in 1998. We saw the winds of change coming, is that if you're selling soap, and basically everyone makes soap exactly the same, And so you advertise it differently, you put different packaging on it, maybe you put a scent on it, or you have a cool name, but basically soap is soap. It's sort of like bottled water today. There's probably 50 or 100 brands of bottled water. What's the difference? Whether it comes from the Alps or it comes from Italy or it comes from, Arkansas, it's basically exactly the same, but you put a cool name on it, you have nice pictures, and that's sort of what's happened with the rookies.
Because of the rules that we put in, beyond the minimum fee, there's basically very little for agents to do. Because the question was, were they going to get a rookie contract with an extra blank percent? Yes, all the good players got that, so there was very little variation there. And then when they got to be at a certain level, the question was whether they were a maximum contract player for that position or not. So the sport moved economically in a way that stratified what players could earn, all very plentiful, but I think might have changed the focus of agents.
It's hard for the agents to differentiate themselves to the players based on their talents or their track record, which is how we sold our services for years. And so it's given rise to the level of differentiation has become how you recruited. And it's illegal for agents to offer anything of financial value to a player to sign them. And that rule is being flaunted every day. And I say that without any rancor or anger. I'm not angry about it, but I think I think it undermines the integrity of everyone in the business. Everyone knows it's going on. It's rampant. I'd rather sign no players than to ever pay $1 to a player to sign them as a client. And so I don't feel I'm not successful because I can't sign for the top 8 players. I have the ability to do it. I'm just not willing to break my own ethics.
In 1999, when he joined SFX, and I was considering several options, there was no doubt in my mind of the options that I had such great respect for David. That's why I ended up at SFX. When I could have gone with other companies for more money, I really wanted to be with David and see if we could pull this off together, working together and joining forces. And it was exciting in the beginning when we were partners.
We bought 14 other agencies. We went from 40 clients to 1,100 in 3 years. And I didn't like it. I didn't like working for a large company. I didn't like the reporting obligations of being a New York Stock Exchange company. I was incredibly surprised by the immaturity of a lot of the executives coming together in a larger company, not willing to give up a certain sense of autonomy or titles to try to create something bigger in a synergy. And so for 6 years, I basically worked on my own as a consultant. There you go, first 7.
The change gave David Falk more time to spend with his family and to work on his golf game.
He's not a good golfer. He worked all the time. No, he's really, really competitive. He's very analytical. He's very deliberate, which in essence says a lot about his negotiation skills. It tells you a lot about his personality in the boardrooms. I think he doesn't do anything without calculating every little move. So in essence, playing golf with him is miserable. You know, it takes forever, and but he's competitive. He really is competitive.
3 decades after he had first arrived on the Syracuse campus, David Falk made a gift to fund the new Department of Sport Management. Falk family contributions, totaling $20 million, have now endowed the David B. Falk College of Sport and Human Dynamics.
Well, my mother was really my principal inspiration to make the gift to the school. My mother was a highly educated woman. She had 2 master's degrees. When I came to Syracuse, I used to write to her. She kept a lot of correspondence. And I told her one day I'm going to do something to make a monument to your name. I really didn't know what that meant. I sort of thought it was like a loving thing to share with my mother.
He's a natural teacher. And I think if he weren't running around doing all the work he does, that's where he would settle, being a teacher. He loves it. He does it as much as he can. He comes into the classroom. The students flock to his classes.
He has a tremendous amount of real-world scenarios and stories that he incorporates into his discussion points with the students, and they're completely engaged. And I think that's David's strength. He's a great communicator. He's an innovator. He's changed the way sports operates from a business model, and what a great opportunity if you're a student to learn from somebody like that.
It's really special to me to have my own college here at Syracuse. My wife went to Syracuse. My younger daughter, JOCELYN, graduated from Newhouse in 10. Syracuse has been a really important part of my life. And I love teaching. And I think the interactions for me with the students keeps me young, keeps me energized, and it gives you a tremendous feeling that no amount of money or making deals or publicity can really compete with. It's a very strong, intangible feeling.
To provide the universities with funds to expand the horizons of young people, bring in interesting professors. Most importantly in today's world, which is constantly changing, creating relevant classes and programs that give the students something to have when they graduate in this changing world. And it means a lot to be part of that.
David Falk has also donated $3 million to the George Washington University Law School to establish the Falk Academy for Management and Entrepreneurship.
We are delighted to present this year's Stockton Guard Alumni Award to a truly devoted alumnus and supporter of our law school, Mr. David Falk, a member of the class of 1975.
In 2007, David Falk returned to the sports representation business when he relaunched F.A.M.E as a boutique agency with a small elite clientele.
I think what I offer is the experience of managing someone's career, of addressing situations like Michael's gambling, which comes up with every player in different forms. If the situation's not working out with his team, of trying to effectuate a trade based on long-term relationships with the owners and the GMs. And of really giving, not trying to be their bud, not trying to be a guy that's going to hang out with them in clubs. I do want to be friendly with them, but I want to be impactful. And I want them to know, just like Michael knew, Patrick knew, Elton Brand knew, in crunch time, if I think you're going down the wrong road, I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to tell you what I think it takes to be successful. Whether you want to accept the advice, that's up to you. But you can count on getting a very strong, opinionated prescription for what it's going to take to be successful from someone who's managed the most successful people in the history of the game.
F.A.M.E 2, as we call it, is all about the amount of time that he spends, that we spend with each of our clients, guiding them through every part of every process in the business, teaching. And he does teach our clients about the business, understanding what they're reading with their contracts, the collective bargaining agreement, what their options are in free agency, the draft process when they're rookies. But he's also teaching them about life.
David's teaching and mentoring has helped me out a whole lot. That's one thing that, everything that I've gone through and everything as far as the business side and all the situations I've been in, he made sure that I understood it. He just didn't tell me. He made sure I understood fully what was going on and why, and what are the consequences, what are the pros, what are the cons. And I think him having that mindset allows the players to grow as far as business-wise. Obviously the players work hard, but to have someone who's been so successful in different parts of life, to always have that wealth of knowledge being thrown at you, it's definitely a big help for me.
Having David there, who has dealt with every single situation, from the highest, most famous player in Michael Jordan to some of his lesser clients. He knew the whole gamut of, what could happen, what would happen, from the draft to your fourth contract. He's dealt with guys that played, 18, 19 years in the league. So having him was invaluable. He knew the ins and outs of the games and what I could expect from the NBA. I learned a lot from him, and anytime I need him, he has been there and he will be there for me. It started off as a business relationship. Now he's like a Like he's like family. He's like a brother to me now.
When I was deciding to leave the Ohio State after my sophomore year, David was pretty much telling me, to stay in school and come back, come out after my junior year where I'll have a chance to win National Player of the Year and be more mature and, in that aspect, kind of make myself some more money. And he's pretty much just saying, like, I'm telling you this to look out for you. I don't need anything from you. I sold my company, so I'm just coming, just giving you advice, whether you want to go with me or not, but I'm just being honest. So if we do decide to work together, you'll be able to trust me and know that I'm not looking out for my best interest, but your best interest. My mother, originally, she thought what everybody else thinks of David, an arrogant ass, and kind of taken back. And, my mom, I'm her youngest son, so she's very protective. And, I think she kind of like some of the ways he's speaking a little bit because he's being, I think, brutally honest in certain areas, along with other agents who are kind of telling us what we wanted to hear and things like that. But I think the biggest thing that he kept reiterating was, he's trying to be honest for the sake of having an open relationship.
David, I think in the last decade, really returned to the purity of the business. And as someone often does after having great success and when one's caught up in growing his career and developing his name, at the end, it's like you get back to the basics. And what is it? What are the basics? The basics is at the end is that key, that relationship with the client and making a positive difference in their life. And that's what he relishes, is to be someone that the client can turn to and that he's involved in every aspect, not just their basketball, but helping them in all phases of their life. And I think that's really what David, what motivates him the most.
I think that the management has become the most important issue because in today's environment of social media and on the internet, instant access to information, the players' lives are so exposed publicly that you've got to coach them and teach them how to protect an opportunity to earn an enormous amount of money in a compressed period of time of, let's say, 8 to 10 years. And I enjoy that. To me, that's like being a teacher.
Well, David Falk changed the profile of NBA players because his clients, he was a devoted representative of them. And he worried about how they looked, where they went, what they wore, what sponsorships they had, how their sponsorships were handled, what effort the client, the sponsor put into promoting his client. He was very intense on that. And so he really became, I guess, a full-service agent.
He always speaks to me about the bigger picture. And, he never lets, he always has, full faith in me. And he always speaks positively from day one as he does now and how big things are going to be and, turning the corner and things like that. And that's spoken volumes. And, I definitely appreciate that more than anything.
The qualities I most value in David would definitely be his honesty, his passion, his loyalty, and his just hunger to work, his desire to succeed. I think it's a great influence on me. It's a great motivation for me.
If I'm recommending to a player who's got one shot, I'm gonna go with David Falk because I knew he knew what he was doing. I knew he would tell the kid the truth, and even to the point of telling some kids that you're making a mistake, that you shouldn't come out of school. You should stay there in school.
If my son was graduating right now and he was going to be the first, second, third pick in the draft, I would tell him to definitely go with David Falk.
Getting my degree during my rookie year in the NBA was a great accomplishment for me and for my family. David was, the driving force, the guy who encouraged me to do it. Sometimes, agents may say, hey, basketball is the number one priority. But here, he knew how, the promise that I made to my grandmother.
He's adapted. I mean, if you're going to sustain excellence, you need to be very adaptive. I mean, there are players who have not played for 15 years or so who draw millions of dollars as a result of the relationships that were established because of a smart agent and making sure these things were done. And David's the one who started that. And then people copied it and obviously put their own stuff into it. But that's a trail that was, it's not a trail, it's like a super highway. He cleared the wilderness, you know, put the asphalt down, put the lines in, and made sure there was no speed limit.
People need vision to be able to rise to the top. And there's a quote that I love quotes, by the way. Carl Sandburg said, it says, vision, nothing happens unless first a dream. David had to be a dreamer, okay? He had to be a dreamer. He had to be able to look somewhere in the future to see what we see today with the league. Certainly, an average person couldn't do that. And when you look at David, you know, I hear people talk about super agents. David was probably our first super agent.
Is there a place for the first super agent in the Basketball Hall of Fame?
There is a category as people who get inducted as contributors, people who have contributed to the NBA. And even though David, probably in the minds of a lot of the people who are on the committees who vote for it, will be looked at as an adversary because of his nature of being an agent and representing players, and also fighting the collective bargaining agreement and trying to make it, a lot better for the players than it is for the owners. But the fact that he has spent 35 years as an agent in the NBA and has dealt with every single team and has dealt with the front office and the league office on a regular basis, his contributions probably somewhere can be or should be recognized as a major contributor. And I could see that as a possibility down the road.
Growing up in a very modest background, I pinch myself from time to time how blessed I've been, A, to do what I love to do. I'm one of the few people that I know that got a chance right after law school to walk right into the job that was my dream job and to work for the best and the brightest for 40 years. I'm grateful to the players that made me who I am, stuck by me. I'm grateful to people like John Thompson, for being a special friend and a mentor. I'm grateful for the, people I work with that make it fun to come into work every day. I'm incredibly grateful.